attrition. And it has decimated the experience which has been built up all over the years. So we need to have the rehabilitation of the refineries and also some intervention in building the capacity of the existing staff.
There continue to be mixed signals from the government regarding the sale of the refineries. It's been said that it will be sold off. It's been said that it will be refurbished before selling. Should NNPC rehabilitate the refineries or just sell them off as they are?
The refineries are owned 100% by the government. Okay. Now, so the government determines what it wants to do.
What do you recommend, given what you know, and given the state these refineries are in?
Yeah. Given what I know now, I would recommend that the government divests some of its equity in the refineries to the extent that enables the refineries to function as independent joint ventures. Similar to what is existing in the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Company. 51% of the equity in NLNG is held by Shell, Total, and Ajib. Government holds 49% through NNPC. So it's an independent joint venture in the real sense of the word. So the decisions that need to be taken for the benefit of the company are taken by the board. And once the board decides, end of story. You don't have to go to any minister or any politician to get an approval. The reason why the refineries have not been able to function properly, have not been able to carry out, NNPC has not been able to carry out the turnaround maintenance is because it needs this government intervention at every case. What I would recommend is for the government to sell 51% minimum of its equity and let 49% be held by NNPC. I would even suggest that beyond the 51%, part of that 49% should be sold to the contiguous states to where the refineries are located. Why do I suggest that? That will give the states a sense of ownership. And then all the problems we are having with pipeline vandalization will be a thing of the past. Because that is another major factor that is contributing to the inability of the refineries to run. Before I left NNPC in December 2013, we had done as much interventions as we could in the refineries, and they were in a state in which they could run. Unfortunately, we could not supply them with crude oil because the pipelines were being vandalized massively. And for up to 6 months, there was no single drop of crude oil supplied to the refineries. And so they were down, not because they could not run, but because they couldn't supply them with crude oil. Now, if the government divests part of its equity and the private entities now have sufficient equity, then the private entities will take the steps that are needed to safeguard the pipelines. Giving the host communities and the host governments a stake, even if it is 5%, in the refineries, will give them a sense of ownership. They will rise up to protect the pipelines.
How much of an impact will the spate of Greenfield projects currently on the table have on the country's import bill?
If all the refineries are running at 100%, they will be refining 445,000 barrels of crude oil per day. In actual fact, that would meet only about 60% of our current demand. So the Greenfield refinery project, in particular the Dangote refinery, when it comes on stream, will make a great contribution to the government, to the country's petroleum product needs. As you know, Dangote is planning 650,000 barrels per day capacity. In actual fact, the full refinery side is 450,000 barrels per day, and 200,000 is supposed to supply a petrochemical plant. So in terms of real refining capacity, that will be 450. Add 450 to the current 445, that gives you almost 900,000. So it will be more than what we need. So there will be an excess for export, which, as you rightly said, will earn foreign exchange for the country.
Talking about exports, some experts say that the refined product will likely be sold on the foreign market, since selling higher grade petrol on the local market would require a much higher subsidy to be competitive with current prices? Do you agree?
In theory, the subsidy has been removed.
In theory?
In theory. The reality is that the landed price of the petroleum products right now makes it such that it's a challenge to sell at 145. To enable this happen, foreign exchange at government preferential rates are being made available for importation of products. That is the only reason why we are still able to sell at 145. So yes, but the government in principle has removed the subsidy. So if Dangote completes his refinery, he will sell what the market demands. My view is that the government should fully deregulate the downstream sector and not be involved in any intervention at all, because that is what will enable market forces determine the price, number one, and then there will be greater efficiency in the downstream industry, not just in the refineries, but also in the storage and distribution network.
How much of an impact exactly has the delayed PIB had on sector investments from indigenous players?
Well, a lot. The very fact that subsidies were still existing until not too long ago made it impossible for any private investor to determine when he will get true returns on his investment, since he was not really able to forecast what he would get for his products were he to sell them to the market. Now, so the non-passage of the PIB has definitely had a negative impact on the downstream sector, as well as the upstream sector. If you talk to our upstream colleagues, they will tell you that for the past 10 years, there has been very little investment in the upstream. The same thing has happened in the downstream. Over 20 licenses to construct refineries were issued by DPR in recent times. Not a single one of them has been utilized because the economics have not been favorable.